Welcome to Crosstown, a review and analysis of the conclusion of Michael Arturo's absurdist story, After Everything I've Done for You. This week, we enter the final act of a narrative that begins like a romantic Craigslist miracle and ends like a queer-inflected geopolitical allegory. The title alone, After Everything I've Done for You, sounds like either a Broadway breakup ballad or something a landlord might mutter as he hands you a rent hike notice.
Here's the setup. Darcy and Cole, straight, earnest, a little too Connecticut, land what they believe is their dream apartment, a rare, rent-controlled slice of West Village charm with exposed brick and just enough square footage to unravel emotionally.
Their dream is short-lived.
Enter Tristan and Juan, queer, caustic, and cosmically unimpressed, who arrive with luggage, a militant Pekingese puppy named AOC, and a lease they claim was reassigned by the enigmatic realtor/disruptor, Omar, who may or may not have keys to every brownstone in Lower Manhattan.
The queer couple's history of navigating gentrification and societal struggles, Stonewall AIDS, rainbow capitalism, is interwoven into the story. Queerness is portrayed not as a tokenistic element, but as a source of resilience and a spiritual militancy in the face of displacement and commodification.
Then what starts as witty repartee quickly escalates into home invasion theater. Darcy and Cole are zip-tied, gagged, and subjected to a kind of queer tribunal. Should they be canceled, curated, or converted into immersive installation art?
But the satire doesn't stop at identity. The apartment, 600 square feet of hardwood and hostility, soon becomes a war zone in the literal sense. A standoff unfolds between Omar and his estranged cousin, the landlord. Gunfire, siege tactics, and rationed lentils follow.
What happens when a rent-controlled apartment becomes a war zone?
You know what fascinates me about this piece? The way the author takes this simple premise, a housing dispute, and transforms it into this incredible commentary on territorial conflict and belonging.
That's where things get really interesting. Because instead of being a simple story about terrible real estate practices, it becomes this brilliant metaphor for displacement and gentrification. The straight couple becomes unwitting representatives of gentrification, while the queer couple represents the displaced original community.
And then there's Omar, possibly the most fascinating character in this whole story. Is he the realtor, the landlord, both, neither?
You know what makes Omar so brilliant? That line where he says, "He calls me the squatter, I call him the occupier, but the truth is, we both have keys." It's like he's speaking about every territorial conflict ever fought.
Yeah, Omar never quite claims he's Palestinian, but at one point says he's technically more Israeli than the landlord.
In spirit, but not in passport.
So Omar never gives himself away, which keeps us guessing, and that is the very point the author wants to highlight in his story.
I also like the way the story handles the evolution of the two couples' relationships, how they go from hostage situation to unlikely allies against the brutal housing market.
And isn't it fascinating how they create this makeshift war zone in their apartment? They're literally building furniture out of IKEA scraps and timing their emotional breakdowns like fire drills.
It's absurdist comedy with a really sharp political edge in an age where every comedian is literally walking on eggshells not to offend.
So, what do you make of that final revelation? When Cole asks if anyone has actually seen Omar and the landlord in the same room?
Well, that's where the author really shows his genius, by refusing to give us a clear answer. And spoiler alert, Omar's response is perfect. They say the same thing about the landlord. He's basically saying that truth itself is negotiable in this conflict.
Yeah, the core conflict within the apartment is an absurdist metaphor for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is what really stood out for me. The dynamic between the straight couple, Darcy and Cole, as potentially representing a form of settler energy, in contrast to the queer couple's historical connection to the space, reinforces this allegory.
So when Omar delivers his final, ambiguous farewell, "After everything I've done for you," he's not just referring to the lease, or the war, or even the champagne.
He's invoking every false savior, every deal maker, every manipulative architect of peace with conditions. He's warning us, if you erase the agent, you erase the betrayal. Erase the landlord, you erase the power. Deny the conflict, and you deny the stakes.
The silence that follows? It's the sound of four people realizing they may have bought into the co-op version of a war zone and inherited its delusions.
The way the story ends, with the building going co op and everyone moaning in unison, it's like this perfect punchline about gentrification, isn't it?
Exactly. And what makes it work so well is how it connects to larger patterns we're seeing in cities everywhere. The way communities get displaced, the way conflict becomes identity, the way peace sometimes feels more threatening than war because it means giving up our familiar roles.
That's such an interesting point about roles and identity. The story really captures how we get locked into positions during conflict.
And look at how the characters handle it. They're dealing with these huge societal issues while also arguing about bathroom schedules and brunch scarcity. It's this perfect blend of the political and the personal.
The way Michael Arturo uses humor to examine these serious issues, it's really masterful. Like when Tristan says, the bourgeois always come in with nut-based things. It's funny, but also so pointed.
You know what really strikes me? The way this story captures the essence of modern urban conflict, how it's never just about space or property, but about narrative ownership. Who gets to tell the story? Who gets to claim belonging?
Well, that's reflected perfectly in how the characters keep questioning their own roles in the conflict, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And in the end, maybe that's what makes this story so powerful. It's not trying to solve anything or pick sides. Instead, it's showing us how we might learn to live with uncertainty, how we might find ways to coexist even when we can't resolve our conflicts completely.
So, what does Michael Arturo's story leave us with? Not resolution, but resonance, not clarity, but confrontation. After Everything I've Done for You is a story that dares to satirize sacred things: the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, queerness, the status-driven economics of overpriced New York real estate, and in doing so, it gives us a deeply uncomfortable, profoundly funny reminder.
Sometimes the only thing harder than choosing a side is giving up the story that told you who you were on it.
Thanks for listening to Crosstown, and if you liked today's episode, subscribe, share, or sit quietly by a broken radiator and think about who you were before the metaphor moved in. Until next time, remember, in New York, peace is just conflict in better lighting.
That's exactly it. Sometimes the best we can hope for isn't perfect resolution, but finding a way to share space, maintain our humanity, and maybe keep a militant Pekingese named AOC on standby, just in case.